What would you do if the only thing between you and danger couldn't speak? The morning air was brisk, tinged with the scent of roasted coffee and the promise of a new day. Michelle Carter lingered on the corner of Maple Avenue, her hand resting lightly on the harness of her German Shepherd Rex. Just a few months ago, she'd have walked this block alone, head high, sunlight bouncing off her military-issue sunglasses. Now shadows and colors were just vague memories. She tilted her head, listening, not just for traffic, but for the sounds that told her the world was still turning as it should. Rex paused at the curb, his body taut but patient, waiting for her command. She trusted him with every step. He'd once been a K-9 officer, and now he was her guide, her lifeline. She could sense the energy in him, alert and quietly powerful, never wavering even when her own confidence did. The familiar chime of the cafe door greeted them as they entered. The cozy space was alive with the clatter of dishes and a chorus of laughter. But Michelle's heart beat faster, unsure if she'd ever feel at home here again. She made her way to her usual table by the window, Rex guiding her around chairs and handbags, his paws nearly silent on the tile. She slid into her seat and reached for her cane, tucking it under the table, then gave Rex a gentle pat. "Good boy," she murmured, her voice soft but steady. The barista, a cheerful college student named Marcy, greeted her as usual. "Hey, Michelle, you want your regular?" Michelle smiled, nodding. "Please, and an extra bowl of water for Rex. He's working hard today." The warmth in Marcy's tone made her feel just a little less invisible. Outside, the sound of engines disrupted the morning calm. 3 motorcycles rumbled into the parking lot, their exhaust echoing like thunder. Michelle tensed, her grip on Rex's harness tightening. She couldn't see the newcomers, but she could picture them. Big boots, leather jackets, loud voices. She'd encountered enough bravado to recognize the type. Her military instincts, though dulled by her new limitations, kicked in. The door banged open, laughter pouring in ahead of the 3 bikers. Their leader, Tyler Chuck Parker, strode in first. Chuck had a reputation around town. A big talker, always needing an audience, easily bored and eager to stir things up. His friends followed, loud and rowdy, filling the cafe with a sense of unease. Michelle straightened her shoulders, trying to project confidence, but she could feel their eyes on her. "Hey, look at that!" Chuck's voice cut through the chatter, sharp and mocking. "That's a real police dog, right? Or is he just a mutt now?" His friends laughed, and one made a low barking sound. The room went quiet, tension settling like fog. Michelle's ears burned. She kept her face neutral, reminding herself she was safe, that Rex was here. Rex sat up straighter, his ears forward, but he didn't react. His discipline was absolute. He'd been trained for moments like this. Still, Michelle's chest tightened. She tried to focus on the clinking of spoons and the low hum of the espresso machine, willing the world to carry on as usual. Chuck and his crew didn't sit right away. Instead, they lingered by Michelle's table, their boots squeaking against the floor. Chuck leaned down, his breath heavy with cigarettes and arrogance. "You know, dogs like that, they're dangerous. You sure you can control him, lady?" Michelle forced a smile, though her hands shook under the table. "Rex is highly trained. He's my guide dog now. Please don't distract him." She tried to sound calm, but she could hear the uncertainty in her own voice. Rex stayed still, eyes locked on Chuck, every muscle ready. Chuck wasn't done. He reached out and snapped his fingers in front of Rex's nose. "Bet he's all bark now, huh?" One of Chuck's friends snickered. "Or maybe she needs the dog to keep people away from her face." A couple of regulars glanced over, shifting uncomfortably. An elderly man at the counter muttered, "Leave her alone, Parker." But Chuck grinned wider, loving the attention. Michelle felt the walls closing in. She was used to holding her own. Years in the army had seen to that. But not being able to see the threat was a whole different kind of helplessness. Her heart pounded. Should she stand up? Should she call for help? Or would that just make things worse? A chair scraped loudly nearby. "Chuck, come on, let's just sit down," one of his friends urged. But Chuck ignored him, pushing a chair with his foot so it bumped against Rex's side. The dog didn't flinch. His restraint was both impressive and, in this moment, infuriatingly silent. Michelle's frustration bubbled over. "Please," she said, louder this time. "You're making my service dog uncomfortable. Back off." Her words hung in the air. For a heartbeat, she wondered if anyone would step in if things got worse. Or if they'd just keep watching, recording, whispering about the blind woman who couldn't even defend herself. Finally, Marcy returned with Michelle's coffee. Her tone was clipped, protective. "Sir, you need to sit down or leave. We don't tolerate harassment here." Chuck snorted, but he relented, finally moving to a table with his friends, muttering insults under his breath. The tension remained, thick and bitter, as if the whole cafe was waiting to see what would happen next. Michelle tried to relax, hands shaking as she brought her cup to her lips. Rex rested his head in her lap, a silent promise of protection. For the rest of the morning, every sound seemed sharper, every laugh edged with something darker. But Rex was there, steady, vigilant, and unafraid, reminding her that she wasn't alone. Not really. Even if the world refused to see her strength, he always would. The buzz of conversation had barely returned when Chuck, still riding the high of his own ego, decided he wasn't done. Michelle, hands wrapped around her coffee mug for comfort, heard his heavy boots scrape against the floor. He was coming back. She tensed, listening as the clatter of his approach grew louder, Rex's body instantly alert beside her. Every inch of Michelle's military training told her danger was close, but without her sight, it was like standing in a storm with no sense of where the lightning might strike. Chuck's voice was lower this time, dripping with a challenge only she and Rex could truly feel. "So you're the tough one around here now, huh?" He moved closer, his friends egging him on with snickers and cruel encouragement. Someone whispered, "Do it, man. Make her jump." Suddenly, Michelle's chair jerked. Chuck had knocked into it hard, nearly spilling her coffee across the table. Rex sprang between them, standing tall but controlled. Michelle gasped, her fingers clinging to the edge of the table, her mind racing. Was anyone going to step in? Would anyone care if this got worse? Chuck, emboldened by the nervous laughs from his crew, shoved another chair in Rex's direction. The chair struck the dog's side, not hard, but enough to provoke. Rex didn't snap or snarl. He simply held his ground, blocking Michelle with his body, every muscle tight, eyes fixed on the threat. His self-control was almost supernatural, the kind of discipline only years of training could produce. "Easy, Rex," Michelle said softly, reaching down to steady herself. Her voice trembled, exposing the fear she tried so hard to hide. She looked in the direction of the commotion, but darkness was all she found. The old fear crept in, the fear that her blindness made her an easy target, that the world was a little less safe now, that people like Chuck would always see her as weak. The bystanders' responses were a mix of outrage and hesitation. An older woman at the next table finally stood up. "That's enough. She's a veteran. Show some respect." But her words only spurred Chuck on. He stepped closer, leaning in so that Michelle could smell the acrid mix of sweat and cigarette smoke. "What are you gonna do if I don't, huh? Sick your mud on me?" A young man in the back pulled out his phone, filming. Someone else whispered, "Should we call the police?" But nobody moved. Everyone was watching, debating, caught between wanting to help and fearing they'd become the next target. The cafe became a stage, and Michelle the unwilling lead in a drama she could neither see nor escape. Chuck knocked into Michelle's chair again, this time with more force, and Rex growled, a deep warning sound, barely restrained. "You hear that?" Chuck taunted. "Dog's about to lose it. What's the matter, boy? Scared to protect your master?" The taunting laughter from his friends made Michelle's skin crawl. Her patience and her sense of safety snapped. "Stop it!" Michelle shouted, her voice echoing through the cafe. It cracked with fear and anger, but she didn't care. "You're harassing me! Leave us alone!" Her hands were shaking so badly now she almost dropped her coffee. Rex pressed closer, a wall of fur and muscle against her trembling legs. For a moment, the room was utterly silent. The tension was a living thing, stretching so tight it felt like it might break. The young man filming muttered, "Man, you're gonna go viral for the wrong reasons." Marcy, the barista, had already called the manager, who appeared at the edge of Michelle's blurred awareness, voice firm. "Sir, step away or I'm calling the cops." But Chuck's grin didn't falter. He looked around, relishing the spotlight, loving the fear and discomfort he'd created. "It's a free country," he sneered. "We're just having fun." Then, with one last show of bravado, he slammed his hand on the table, causing Michelle to flinch. He laughed and turned away, swaggering back to his friends. The bystanders, emboldened by the manager's presence, finally spoke up, murmuring support to Michelle. "Don't mind him," said the older woman, her voice shaky with adrenaline. "He's all talk." But Michelle was barely listening, her mind spinning with what-ifs and what-could-happens. She knew too well that people like Chuck often came back, angrier than before. Rex, sensing her distress, nuzzled her hand, his silent reassurance anchoring her. She tried to steady her breath, pushing down the rising tide of fear. But the humiliation clung to her, sticky and suffocating. She wanted to be strong, to show everyone, herself included, that she wasn't just some helpless, blind woman. But her voice had trembled, her hands had shaken, and she hated that Chuck had seen it. Marcy came over, lowering her voice. "You okay, Michelle? Want me to call someone?" Michelle shook her head. "Thank you, Marcy. I'll be all right. Just give me a minute." She reached for Rex again, burying her face in his fur, grateful for the shield he provided, if not against the world's cruelty, then at least against its indifference. As Chuck and his friends finally left the cafe, the door slamming behind them, a collective sigh rippled through the room. Conversations started up again, but the laughter was forced, uneasy. Michelle remained frozen, clinging to Rex and the fading hope that things would return to normal. She wanted to disappear, to fade into the background, but it was too late. She was the story now. In the aftermath, she forced herself to thank the people who'd spoken up, even as shame burned in her cheeks. She didn't want their pity, only their respect. She tried to smile, to show them she was still in control, but inside she was falling apart. Outside, the motorcycles roared to life, the sound fading into the distance, but the sense of vulnerability lingered. Michelle squeezed Rex's harness, whispering, "Thank you, buddy. I don't know what I'd do without you." As the cafe settled back into its routine, Michelle felt a wave of frustration and doubt. Was her blindness really a weakness, or just another way for people like Chuck to feel powerful? She wasn't sure. All she knew was that the world had changed, and she'd have to change with it. And Rex, loyal and silent, would be with her every step of the way. The cafe seemed to hold its breath long after Chuck and his crew left. But for Michelle, the world felt shaky and off-kilter. She tried to focus on the comforting warmth of her coffee, the familiar scents of baked goods and cinnamon, but fear clung to her shoulders like a cold, damp coat. Rex, ever vigilant, stayed close at her feet. Even as the chatter in the cafe resumed and Marcy worked quietly behind the counter, Michelle sensed a new wariness in the air. Everyone had seen the encounter, and no one quite knew what would happen next. She replayed every second in her mind, frustration building with each memory. Why hadn't more people stepped in sooner? Why had she felt so alone, even in a room full of witnesses? Her grip tightened on Rex's harness, grounding herself in the reassuring feel of his fur, his quiet, steady presence. Michelle forced herself to sit upright, projecting an air of confidence. She was a veteran, a survivor, and yet, losing her sight sometimes made her feel like she'd lost everything else too. But Rex was here. He always was. And she owed it to him, and to herself, not to let fear win. As she gathered her things to leave, she heard hushed voices from a nearby table. "That was crazy. You think he'll come back?" a woman whispered. "I hope not," her companion replied. "But people like that never quit easy." Michelle tried to block it out. She didn't want to be the subject of gossip. She just wanted her life back. Rex stood and waited, watching for her next cue. The automatic door chimed as they stepped out into the daylight. Michelle inhaled the crisp morning air, letting it fill her lungs. She straightened her shoulders and gave Rex a gentle command. "Let's go, buddy." The walk home was usually her time to reset, but today every footstep sounded louder. Every passing car seemed to slow. Every breeze felt colder. Halfway down the block, Michelle's phone buzzed. She paused, pulling it from her pocket, listening for the accessibility features to read her texts aloud. A message from Jasmine, her best friend and confidant, popped up. "Heard what happened. Are you okay? Call me if you need anything." Michelle's lips curled into a small, grateful smile. She didn't feel like talking yet, but it was good to know someone was thinking of her. At the crosswalk, Rex paused again, his body stiffening slightly. Michelle's pulse quickened. Was someone following her? She strained to listen, but all she heard was the distant roar of Chuck's motorcycle as it faded into the morning. She tried to shake the paranoia, focusing instead on the feel of Rex's harness, the rhythm of his steps guiding her forward. Back home, Michelle locked the door behind her, the sound echoing through her small apartment. She slipped off her shoes, feeling the plush carpet underfoot, and listened as Rex paced the living room, his nails clicking softly on the hardwood. Michelle let herself sink onto the couch, exhaustion washing over her in a heavy wave. She couldn't help replaying the scene, Chuck's taunts, the weight of all those staring eyes, the helplessness she'd felt. Rex sat beside her, pressing his warm body against her leg, as if to remind her that he was still there, still watching over her. She reached for his head, running her fingers through his fur, letting his presence pull her back from the edge. "Thank you, Rex," she whispered. "You're the only reason I didn't lose it in there." Rex responded with a gentle sigh, his tail thumping softly on the floor. A sudden knock at the door startled both of them. Michelle's heart leapt into her throat, but Rex didn't bark. He simply stood, muscles taut, eyes locked on the door. Michelle forced herself to stand, moving cautiously. "Who is it?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's just me, Miss Carter. Officer Ramirez," came the reply. Michelle exhaled with relief and opened the door. Officer Ramirez had been by before, checking in on her since her accident. He offered a gentle smile. "Just wanted to make sure you got home okay. Heard there was a little trouble at the cafe this morning." Michelle managed a small nod, grateful for the check-in. "Everything's fine thanks to Rex," she replied. "He's got better instincts than most people." Ramirez glanced at Rex, respect in his voice. "I don't doubt it. That dog's got a reputation. Everyone at the station talks about how steady he is." He hesitated. "But if Chuck comes around again, call us. Don't try to handle it alone." Michelle nodded, promising she would. But inside she wondered if the police could really do much. She'd seen enough to know that threats often slipped through cracks, especially when the target was someone easy to overlook. After Ramirez left, Michelle sat with Rex for a long time, letting silence fill the space. She remembered her years in the service, how she'd been trained to spot threats, to stand her ground, to fight back. Now the battles were different, and her weapons were trust, patience, and a dog who never left her side. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. This one from the cafe manager. "Please let us know if you need anything. We're sorry about what happened. You're always welcome here." It was a small gesture, but it made Michelle feel a little less alone. As evening fell, she began to unwind, feeling Rex's slow, steady breathing beside her. But the day's events lingered. She wondered if Chuck would keep his promise. Would he come back? Would he find her at her most vulnerable? Would the world watch and do nothing? Rex shifted, sensing her unease, and laid his head on her lap. Michelle smiled, tears prickling at her eyes, but she blinked them away. "We're okay, Rex. We'll be okay." That night, as she lay in bed, she reached for the familiar comfort of Rex's fur and let herself believe, if only for a moment, that they could handle whatever came next. The world might not always be kind, but as long as she had Rex, she would never be defenseless. Not truly, not in the ways that mattered most. And in the darkness, Rex remained her silent guardian, a living reminder that even in a world full of threats, some bonds could never be broken. The sun was already low when Michelle started to feel the walls of her apartment closing in. After a day like that, home was supposed to be a safe haven, a place where she could let her guard down, surrounded by the familiar warmth of her belongings, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the soft brush of Rex's tail as he moved around. But tonight, every creak and distant shout seemed magnified, as if the world outside was pressing its ear to her door. Rex paced the hallway, his nails tapping an anxious rhythm. He was usually calm at home, but tonight, he couldn't settle. He would stop at the front door, sniff, let out a low, rumbling growl, then trot to the window, ears pricked. Michelle listened to his movements, her own anxiety rising in time with his. She sat on the edge of the couch, one hand gripping her phone, the other resting on Rex's broad back. She tried to talk herself down. "It's just nerves," she thought. "A stressful day, a bad encounter. Everyone feels jumpy after something like that." But Rex's instincts had never failed her before. If he sensed danger, she had learned to trust it. The minutes dragged. Every car that rumbled by, every thump from a neighbor's apartment, made her tense. Her mind raced with scenarios. Chuck lurking outside, waiting for darkness. Chuck following her from the cafe. Chuck knocking on her door just to remind her she wasn't really safe. Not even here. She glanced at her phone, thumb hovering over Jasmine's contact. She hesitated. Was she overreacting? Would Jasmine just tell her to breathe, to get some rest? But the loneliness was overwhelming, and she needed to hear a familiar voice. She pressed call. Jasmine picked up on the first ring, her voice instantly warm and concerned. "Michelle, are you okay? You sound tense." Michelle tried to keep her voice steady, but she couldn't help the quiver. "Jess, I just needed to talk. It's been a rough day. Rex keeps pacing, and I can't shake the feeling that someone's watching us." Jasmine's tone softened, her words like a blanket. "Breathe, girl. You're home, and you've got Rex. That dog's smarter than most people. If he's alert, it's worth paying attention. But don't let fear take over. Do you want me to come over?" Michelle shook her head, though Jasmine couldn't see it. "No, it's late. I just needed to hear your voice. I feel so helpless sometimes. Like every bit of independence I thought I'd rebuilt can just vanish in a heartbeat." Jasmine didn't hesitate. "You're not helpless. You're the strongest person I know. And asking for help, that's strength too. Even soldiers call for backup sometimes. And hey, if Rex thinks something's up, you trust him. Lock the doors, keep your phone close. And remember, you are not alone in this, even when it feels like it." Michelle let out a shaky laugh, feeling some of the tightness in her chest loosen. "Thanks, Jazz. I mean it. I think I just needed someone to remind me I'm not going crazy." Jasmine laughed gently. "Well, you're a little crazy, but you're also brave as hell. And you've got a dog who'd take on the world for you. That's more than most people can say." After hanging up, Michelle walked the apartment, running her hand along the walls, checking the locks twice. She let Rex sniff every room, reassuring herself that he would alert her if anything was truly wrong. Still, unease gnawed at her. In her old life, before she lost her sight, she would have checked the windows herself, scanned the street for threats. Now she had to rely on her other senses, and Rex's. She sat back on the couch, listening for comfort in the familiar sounds of her home. The clock ticked steadily. The city outside was alive with faraway sirens and the laughter of people passing below her window. But every time she started to drift, a sudden noise, a car door slamming, the thud of footsteps in the hall, snapped her awake. The worst part wasn't fear of Chuck himself. It was the doubt he'd planted. Was she really as strong as she thought? Or was she just pretending? If she couldn't see the dangers coming, could she really keep herself safe? Or was she just waiting for someone else to save her? Rex, sensing her distress, climbed onto the couch and pressed his head into her lap. She stroked his ears, the repetitive motion soothing them both. "You're right, buddy. We've got this. We always do." She forced herself to focus on his steady breathing, the warmth of his fur, the trust they'd built in the months since she lost her sight. In a world that had changed so much, Rex was her constant. As midnight neared, Michelle finally felt herself relax. She left a lamp on and pulled a chair against the front door, a small barrier, but it made her feel better. She took a deep breath, whispered goodnight to Rex, and let herself drift into an uneasy sleep. But even as sleep took her, one thought lingered. Tomorrow, she'd have to go out again. She'd have to face the world, and maybe even Chuck. But whatever waited outside, she wasn't facing it alone. She fell asleep with Rex's head still resting on her legs, both of them listening to the silence, both of them ready for whatever came next. And in that quiet, she realized that strength wasn't always about fighting. It was about trusting herself, her instincts, and the loyal guardian by her side. The night passed slowly. Michelle woke more than once, heart pounding at the smallest noise, an engine in the distance, footsteps in the hallway, Rex stirring from his sleep. Morning brought no real relief. She went through the motions, feeding Rex, making her own breakfast, carefully moving through her small apartment, the familiar path giving her a sense of control. But beneath every routine movement lurked unease, a suspicion that danger might be waiting just out of reach. Rex, for his part, was restless. He stayed close, rarely straying more than a few feet away. He sniffed at the front door, paced from room to room, and watched every shadow as if expecting it to leap at them. Michelle trusted his instincts. Every so often, she paused, listening to the quiet hum of the building, trying to decide if she should reach out to someone. Maybe Jasmine. Maybe even the police. But what would she say? That her dog was uneasy? That she just had a feeling? As evening fell, Michelle tried to distract herself. She played music, worked through a few chores, and rehearsed answers to questions she'd get if anyone asked about her day. But she couldn't shake the sense that something was off. Rex lay by her feet, head up, ears twitching at every sound. Around 9, the sound of a motorcycle engine shattered the calm. It revved loudly outside her building, the noise echoing through the quiet street. Michelle's blood ran cold. She reached for her phone, hands trembling. Rex stood instantly, hackles up, moving to stand between Michelle and the door. The engine didn't fade away. Instead, it grew louder, circling the block, then idled right outside her window. Michelle's breathing grew shallow as she heard a voice, Chuck's voice, shouting over the engine. "Hey, Carter! You think your dog can protect you forever?" His words slurred slightly, twisted by the distance and the rumble of the bike. "Come out and say hi, why don't you?" Rex growled, a deep and rumbling warning that sent a shiver down Michelle's spine. She kept her voice low and steady, hoping Rex could sense her trying to be brave. "It's okay, buddy. I'm calling for help." She dialed 911, trying to keep her words clear despite the fear. "There's a man outside my apartment. He's circling on a motorcycle, shouting threats. My guide dog is alert and upset. I'm blind. Please send someone quickly." The operator's voice was calm and efficient. "Stay inside. Keep your doors locked. Officers are on the way. Can you give me a description?" Michelle shook her head. "He's on a loud motorcycle. His name is Chuck Parker. My dog's barking and growling. Please hurry." She stayed on the line, listening to the operator's steady instructions, her heart hammering in her chest. Outside, the engine revved again. Chuck's taunts grew louder, more aggressive. "Thought you were tough, Carter. Not so tough now, huh?" Rex barked, sharp and insistent, as if daring Chuck to come closer. The minutes dragged by like hours. Michelle stayed crouched behind her couch, phone clutched in one hand, the other gripping Rex's collar. She could hear Chuck's friends laughing, the echo bouncing off the empty street. A bottle shattered somewhere nearby, making Rex bark even louder. At last, the sound of sirens split the night. The motorcycle engine sputtered, then roared away. Michelle's shoulders sagged in relief. She stayed on the phone as the operator assured her that officers were arriving. A knock at the door came minutes later. "Miss Carter, it's the police." She stood, heart still pounding, and let them in. There were 2 officers, their presence a sudden flood of security and awkwardness. Rex remained alert, but allowed them inside, his eyes never leaving the door. One of the officers, a tall, skeptical man whose badge read Officer Brandt, took a look around. "So what happened here?" Michelle repeated her story, describing the motorcycle, the threats, and Rex's reactions. Brandt raised an eyebrow. "Your dog seems pretty worked up. He ever get like this before?" Michelle steadied herself, her words clipped but calm. "Rex is a retired K9. He doesn't bark for no reason. If he's upset, there's a real threat." Brandt exchanged a look with his partner, who nodded thoughtfully. Mind if we take a look around? The other officer asked. Michelle shook her head and let them move through the apartment. They found glass near the window, remnants of the shattered bottle, and fresh tire marks outside in the parking lot. Brant's skepticism softened, replaced by a grudging respect. We'll file a report, and I'll request increased patrols tonight and tomorrow. If anything else happens, call us right away. Michelle nodded, relief and exhaustion mingling inside her. After the officers left, Michelle double-checked every lock and set Rex at her side. She texted Jasmine, telling her what happened, and received a flurry of worried messages in return. Despite the police presence, Michelle knew the threat hadn't passed. Chuck might be gone for now, but men like him rarely let go so easily. She lay in bed, sleep eluding her, every nerve stretched thin. But Rex was there, pressed close, his breathing slow and steady. Michelle whispered into the darkness, more to herself than anyone else. We're safe tonight. We'll stay safe. You did good, Rex. Even as she said it, she knew the road ahead would be rough. But for now, with Rex watching the door and her courage rebuilding, Michelle believed, if only for the night, that she could face whatever came next. By morning, the whole neighborhood had heard about the incident outside Michelle's apartment. It started with a flurry of messages in the cafe group chat. Marcy posted first, then the older woman from yesterday chimed in. And soon enough, neighbors who'd only ever nodded politely in the hallway were now calling and texting, asking if Michelle was okay or if she needed anything. The incident was more than just a bad night. It had become a rallying cry for the block. Michelle woke to a dozen missed calls and texts. Even Jasmine had left a voice message. Hey, just checking in. I talked to Marcy and she told me about last night. Don't be stubborn. Let us help. We've got your back. Michelle managed a wry smile, grateful but embarrassed at the same time. She'd spent so long trying to prove she didn't need help, that now, when she actually did, she felt awkward accepting it. After breakfast, she took Rex out for his morning walk, nerves taut as she stepped into the world again. She couldn't see the looks of concern that followed her, but she could feel them. Pauses in conversation as she passed. Quiet greetings laced with something heavier than politeness. Rex guided her with quiet confidence, sniffing the sidewalk, ears flicking at every unusual sound. As she walked, Michelle heard her name called. Michelle, wait up! It was Jasmine, out of breath, jogging up beside her. I'll walk with you today, she said, linking her arm with Michelle's. I told you last night. You're not alone. Together they walked to the cafe, where Marcy greeted them with an extra bright, good morning, and pressed a free pastry into Michelle's hand. On the house today, okay? She whispered. And there's a group of us talking about starting a neighborhood watch. I know it sounds old-fashioned, but we want everyone to feel safe, especially you. Inside, the regulars were buzzing. The older man who'd spoken up the other day approached Michelle. Saw the cops out last night. If that punk comes around again, you call us, all right? A bunch of us are taking turns walking past your place in the evenings. Can't let the bad guys think they own the street. Michelle's heart lifted, just a bit, at their solidarity. She thanked everyone, feeling their concern settle around her like a protective cloak. But there was something else there too. A collective unease. No one wanted trouble, but nobody wanted to feel powerless either. Jasmine spent the morning making calls and sending texts, quietly organizing a system of escorts and check-ins for Michelle's errands. You don't have to do everything alone, she told her, almost stern. It's not weakness to let people care about you. A few hours later, Officer Brant and his partner returned for a follow-up. Brant's tone was more respectful this time. We're increasing patrols, and we've got your report logged as a harassment case. If you notice anything else out of place or if Rex alerts, don't wait. Call us. Also, here's a few tips. Keep lights on at night. Don't open the door to anyone you're not expecting. And if you want, we can arrange for a safety assessment of your building." Michelle nodded, listening carefully. She relayed Rex's reactions the night before, emphasizing his K-9 training and instinct. Brant listened, glancing at Rex with a hint of admiration. "Honestly, that dog's better than half my rookie squad. You're in good hands." That afternoon, Jasmine coordinated with cafe regulars and a few neighbors. Michelle found herself surrounded by people who wanted to help. People who, a week ago, had been little more than faces in the crowd. Jasmine insisted on walking her home and staying for coffee. "We need to talk about boundaries, Michelle. You're not allowed to turn down help anymore. It's doctor's orders," she joked, but her eyes were serious. Later, as Michelle sat with Jasmine in her living room, she realized how much had changed. The community was rallying. Neighbors were texting her, checking in, letting her know when someone unfamiliar was in the building. One woman, a single mom from down the hall, dropped off a plate of cookies and said she'd keep her eyes open for trouble. But the changes were deeper than just a few extra check-ins or baked goods. For the first time since losing her sight, Michelle felt seen, not as a victim or a symbol, but as a person worth defending. The fear and anger of the last days hadn't vanished, but they felt lighter, more manageable. Rex had become a neighborhood celebrity. Kids asked if they could pet him. Adults inquired about his training. He was no longer just Michelle's eyes. He was a living symbol of resilience and vigilance. When Rex sat alert by the door, people felt a little safer. When he relaxed, so did the whole block. That evening, Jasmine left, promising to check in before bed. Michelle walked Rex one more time, feeling the breeze and listening to distant laughter from an open window. Every step, every smile, every small gesture of care from her neighbors built something new inside her, a fragile but growing sense of safety and belonging. As she locked her door and Rex settled at her feet, Michelle whispered, "Thank you, buddy. Not just for protecting me, but for showing me that I'm not as alone as I thought." Rex lifted his head and nuzzled her hand, his silent promise echoing louder than words. Michelle lay in bed that night, the weight of fear lighter than it had been in days. She knew Chuck was still out there, and danger hadn't vanished. But now she was surrounded by people ready to stand with her. And with Rex by her side, she felt, for the first time in a long while, like maybe, just maybe, she could let herself hope again. By the end of the week, the neighborhood felt different. Where there had once been silent hallways and distracted nods, now there were purposeful footsteps, whispered plans, and watchful eyes behind curtains. Jasmine had become the unofficial leader of the neighborhood watch, a role she relished. Michelle, for her part, learned to accept help with a humility she'd never expected to need. People escorted her to the cafe, checked in when she walked Rex, and paused in conversation to ask how she was really doing. But beneath the new sense of community was a current of unease. Everyone was waiting, in their own way, for the other shoe to drop. Chuck's motorcycle hadn't been seen since the police visit, but nobody was naive enough to think he was truly gone. Michelle kept her phone charged and close, keys ready in her pocket, and Rex on alert. If she learned anything from the army, it was that silence from a threat didn't mean safety. It meant preparation. Saturday afternoon was warm and restless. Michelle decided she wouldn't stay inside, not out of fear. With Rex at her side, she stepped out for a walk. Jasmine joined her, and soon a couple of neighbors, Mr. Grant, the retired mailman, and Angela, the young mom from down the hall, fell into step with them. The impromptu group made their way down the block, chatting quietly about everything and nothing. It was the most normal Michelle had felt in weeks, but that fragile sense of normalcy was shattered by the sharp, unmistakable roar of a motorcycle engine. It tore through the late afternoon quiet like a threat made real. Michelle felt Rex stiffen, and every conversation around her went silent. She couldn't see the panic ripple through the group, but she could feel it. A tightening, a collective breath held. The bike appeared at the end of the block, revving its engine in defiance. "Chuck," his voice echoed, even over the rumble. "Hey, I'm back, Carter. Let's see your mutt protect you now." He revved again, circling slowly in front of the building, headlights swinging across the sidewalk. Rex positioned himself in front of Michelle, body tense and eyes never leaving the source of the threat. Michelle took a shaky breath, forcing herself to stand tall. Jasmine squeezed her arm. "We're right here. He's not getting past us." What happened next was unscripted but powerful. The neighbors, who'd just weeks ago barely known each other, moved in sync. Mr. Grant pulled out his phone and started recording. Angela called out in a clear, unwavering voice, "We're watching you, Chuck. Get out of here before you end up on the news." Windows opened above them, faces appeared, and cell phones were raised. Someone shouted, "We called the cops!" Michelle felt the presence of her community like a wall behind her. The fear that had haunted her shrank a little. Chuck's threats, which once seemed all-consuming, suddenly felt small against the rising tide of collective resolve. The block was watching, and so was the world. Chuck revved his engine again, but his bravado was brittle. He barked insults, most of them directed at Michelle and Rex, but the crowd only grew louder, jeering him, calling out for him to leave. Michelle felt Rex's calm, unwavering presence and let it fill her with strength. She let go of Jasmine's arm, stepped forward until she was just behind Rex, and lifted her chin. She spoke, her voice low but strong. "You can threaten me all you want, but I'm not alone. I have Rex, and I have everyone here. You don't scare us." Her words were simple, but they rang out, carried by the crowd's growing courage. Chuck tried one more time, circling closer. He pointed at Michelle. "You think they're always going to be here? You're weak." But the words fell flat against the wall of defiance. Even Rex didn't so much as flinch. He simply stood, silent and resolute, a living shield. It was the neighbors who forced Chuck back. People spilled out onto the sidewalk, cameras rolling, voices rising. "Get lost! You're not welcome here! The whole block's watching!" The noise swelled, overwhelming Chuck's threats. For the first time, Michelle heard uncertainty in his voice, a hesitation as he realized he was outnumbered. Then, as quickly as he'd arrived, Chuck revved his engine and sped off, tires squealing in frustration. The block burst into cheers, relieved, triumphant, united. Michelle felt Jasmine hug her tight, and neighbors came forward, clapping her on the back, thanking Rex, congratulating each other. For the first time in a long while, Michelle's fear had been replaced with something new: pride. A few minutes later, police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing. Brant stepped out, looking over the crowd. "We got a dozen calls about a disturbance. Everyone okay?" The neighbors quickly filled him in, showing videos and telling their versions of what happened. Brant took notes, nodding. "Looks like you all handled it better than most. Keep those videos. I'll need them. And Michelle, you did good." As the police left and the crowd dispersed, Michelle stood for a moment on the sidewalk, breathing in the evening air. Rex leaned into her, calm now that the danger had passed. Jasmine grinned. "See, we're stronger together. That's how you face a bully." Michelle nodded, her voice steady. It's not about being fearless. It's about standing up, even when you're scared, and having people, having a whole block, who stand up with you. That night, Michelle slept with her window cracked open, listening to the quiet laughter of neighbors, the bark of distant dogs, and the steady breathing of Rex by her side. The threat hadn't vanished, but the fear no longer ruled her. Together, they had turned a victim's silence into a survivor's roar. And for the first time in a long while, Michelle felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Sunday afternoon bloomed with a crisp blue sky, drawing people out of their apartments and onto the sidewalks. The block felt alive. Kids rode bikes, music drifted from open windows, and a group of neighbors lingered near the cafe, cups of coffee warming their hands and easing their nerves. It was almost easy to forget the tension of the past week, but for Michelle, the undercurrent of anticipation remained. She felt it in every cautious footstep and in Rex's alert posture as they navigated the familiar route to the cafe. Michelle was determined not to let fear drive her back inside. Jasmine, never far away, walked beside her, chatting about anything except what they both knew was coming. Rex led the way, every muscle taut, tail waving like a small flag of defiance. As they approached the cafe, Michelle could sense the shift, the way conversations paused, the air prickled with a strange expectancy. She took a deep breath and pressed on, refusing to let anxiety win. Then the sound came, unmistakable and unwelcome. The deep growl of a motorcycle engine, this time echoing with a challenge that made every head turn. Chuck's bike roared into view, screeching to a halt in the middle of the block, cutting off traffic and conversation alike. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Chuck hopped off the bike, helmet dangling in one hand, eyes locked on Michelle and Rex. His friends fanned out behind him, their presence a clear attempt at intimidation. "Well, well, if it isn't the neighborhood hero and her mutt," he called, his voice mocking but forced. The crowd tightened, forming a protective circle around Michelle, some filming, others simply standing tall. Michelle straightened, squaring her shoulders. She felt the heat of dozens of eyes on her, not just her neighbors, but strangers, the barista, even people watching from their windows above. She could feel Rex at her side, his body a solid, steady anchor in a storm of uncertainty. Chuck strutted closer, his bravado louder than his voice. "What's the matter, Carter? Gonna hide behind your dog again? Or do you want your little friends to fight your battles now?" The taunt was meant to rattle her, but Michelle stood firm, hands resting on Rex's harness. Her chin lifted in quiet defiance. "I'm not hiding, Chuck," she said, her voice carrying clear and strong. "You think I'm alone because I can't see you? Look around. I'm not the one who needs backup. I've got Rex, and I've got this whole block behind me." Her words landed like a spark in dry grass. The crowd murmured its approval, a low rumble of support that built with every second. Chuck's sneer faltered, but he tried again, stepping close enough for Michelle to hear the anger in his voice. "You're weak. You're nothing without that dog. And all these people, they're just pretending to care." Rex didn't growl or bark. He simply planted himself between Michelle and Chuck, his restraint more powerful than aggression. His eyes never left Chuck's face, and his silence spoke volumes, a wall that Chuck could not break. Jasmine stepped forward, her voice like steel. "You're outnumbered, Chuck. Nobody here is afraid of you anymore. Maybe you should be the one leaving." Other neighbors chimed in, some filming, some shouting, others simply standing in solidarity. Someone called, "We're live streaming this." Another, "Police are on their way." Chuck glared at Michelle. frustration twisting his features. He turned his anger on the crowd, yelling insults and daring someone to step forward. But no one budged. Instead, phones kept recording, voices kept rising. And the circle only tightened, more neighbors joining from every direction. Michelle, heart pounding, found herself growing steadier. She reached down and squeezed Rex's shoulder. Drawing strength from his presence, she turned slightly toward Chuck, letting her words rise above the chaos. I may not see you, but I know what you are. You can't intimidate what you can't break. You tried to scare me, but you just brought us all together. That's what real strength looks like. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then, as if on cue, the block erupted in cheers and applause, the kind that echoed down the street and through the open windows above. Chuck, realizing he'd lost his audience, looked around, searching for any support. But even his friends shifted uncomfortably, backing away as police cruisers turned the corner, lights flashing. The officers arrived, pushing through the crowd. Officer Brandt found Michelle first, his voice calm. Are you all right? Michelle nodded, her hand never leaving Rex. Brandt turned to Chuck, voice hardening. We warned you, hands behind your back. The arrest was quick and uneventful, the threat finally, publicly, removed. But the real victory was not in Chuck's defeat. It was in what he left behind. The crowd lingered, sharing hugs and high fives, reviewing videos and replaying what had just happened. Strangers who might never have spoken were suddenly connected by a shared stand against intimidation. Michelle became the focal point of a dozen conversations, people thanking her for her courage, asking about Rex, offering support in ways big and small. Within hours, the footage went viral. News crews picked up the story, headlines flashed across social media, and people from across the country chimed in, praising the neighborhood's unity and Rex's quiet heroism. Michelle did her best to stay humble, but inside, she felt something she hadn't felt in months: hope. Not just for herself, but for the idea that one person, or one dog, really could make a difference. That night, the block felt different, lighter, safer, and more connected. Michelle and Rex walked home together, side by side, no longer just a team of two, but part of a pack. And for the first time in a long time, Michelle faced the future with her head high, surrounded by the strength of community and the unspoken promise that no one would ever stand alone on their street again. In the days that followed, Michelle's life transformed in ways she'd never imagined. What had started as a nightmare became a spark for something bigger, not just for her, but for everyone in the neighborhood. The viral videos brought attention not only from local news, but from people across the country who saw in Michelle's story a mirror for their own fears and their own hopes. The first call came from the mayor's office, an invitation to speak at the upcoming town meeting about public safety and the challenges facing people with disabilities. Michelle hesitated, uncertain she wanted to be at the center of attention again. But Jasmine nudged her. You have a chance to make a real difference, Michelle. You and Rex. People listen when you speak up. She remembered the fear in her voice at the cafe, the way she'd felt when Chuck first singled her out. That wasn't a weakness. It was the beginning of courage. With Rex at her side, she agreed. The night of the town meeting, the community center buzzed with nervous anticipation. Reporters hovered near the door. Neighbors crowded into folding chairs. Michelle sat in the front row, her hand resting on Rex's broad back, listening to the swirl of voices around her. When her name was called, she rose with Rex and walked to the podium, feeling every eye in the room. She paused, centering herself, letting the silence settle before she began. My name is Michelle Carter. Some of you know me as the woman who lives on Maple Avenue. Some of you know me as the veteran with the big German Shepherd. And after this week, a lot more of you know me as the lady who stood up to a bully with nothing but her dog and her community behind her. She paused, waiting for the murmurs to subside. But that's not the whole story. The truth is, I was scared. I am scared sometimes, especially since I lost my sight. I've learned that when people see someone like me, someone with a disability, they don't always see the person. Sometimes, they only see weakness. They see someone to pity, or worse, someone to target. That's what happened to me. But that's not the end of the story. Because I wasn't alone. My dog Rex, he's more than my guide. He's my guardian. And my neighbors, they became my eyes when I needed them most. She could hear people shifting in their seats, the weight of her words settling in. This week, we learned that safety isn't just about locks and patrol cars. It's about vigilance. It's about people who look out for each other. It's about trust. Trusting those who've earned it, whether they're on 2 legs or 4. It's about asking for help and accepting it, even when it's hard. Michelle glanced down at Rex, feeling the warmth of his presence. There's a word for what happened to me. Ableism. It means judging someone by what you think they can't do instead of seeing what they can. When Chuck targeted me, he thought I'd be easy to scare because I'm blind. He thought my dog was just a pet. But Rex is trained to protect, to serve, to sense danger. He's not just my helper. He's my partner. And together, with all of you, we proved that nobody has to stand alone. She raised her voice, letting conviction strengthen her. I hope what happened here shows us all how fragile safety can be, and how strong we can be when we stand together. Don't wait until someone's in trouble to speak up. Don't assume someone with a disability is helpless. And don't underestimate the power of trust. Trust in each other, trust in our instincts, and trust in the bonds we build. After she finished, the applause was thunderous, echoing through the crowded room. The mayor thanked her, calling her a role model for courage and community. Several people rose to share their own stories. An elderly man who'd been robbed but afraid to speak up. A teenager who admitted he'd been bullied for his stutter. A single mother who'd always felt invisible until now. One by one, people spoke, inspired by Michelle's honesty and Rex's quiet vigilance. The next day, Michelle was invited to share her story on the local news. She sat in the studio, Rex calm and dignified at her feet, answering questions about what it meant to trust, to feel vulnerable, to stand up to ableism. She talked about how it felt when the crowd at the cafe hesitated, and how much it meant when the neighborhood finally found its voice. Sometimes, it just takes one person to stand up and everyone else realizes they can too. I couldn't have done any of this without Rex, and I couldn't have done it without the people who decided to care. Social media flooded with messages. Strangers thanking Michelle for her bravery. Other people with disabilities sharing stories of guardianship and trust. And even canine handlers from around the country expressing pride in Rex. He became a local celebrity. Children drew pictures of him. Neighbors brought treats. And the cafe displayed his photo behind the counter. Through it all, Michelle stayed humble. She made sure every interview ended with the same message. I'm not a hero. I just did what I had to do, and so did Rex. If our story changes how people see someone like me, even just a little, then it was worth it. At home, Michelle reflected on the journey. She remembered the fear, the moments of doubt, the anger at being singled out, the helplessness and the strength she'd found in asking for help. Rex's presence was a constant reminder that true guardianship was about trust, loyalty, and mutual respect. She realized that real change wasn't just about one person fighting back, but about a whole community choosing to see, to care, and to act. The town learned a lesson too. A lesson about hesitation and what it costs. About the importance of acting instead of just watching. The story of Michelle and Rex was now their story too. A story about what it really means to keep each other safe. Months passed, and Maple Avenue found itself transformed. The memory of Chuck's threats faded, replaced by something far more lasting. The story of how one woman, her loyal dog, and a community learned to stand together. On warm mornings, children still gathered outside the cafe, but now they pointed and giggled at the framed plaque that hung near the door. A tribute to Rex, the retired K-9 who'd shown everyone what real courage looked like. It read, "In honor of Rex for watching over us all." Life settled into a new rhythm. The neighborhood watch continued, though now the evening patrols were more about friendship than fear. People who'd once passed each other in silence now stopped to talk, share news, or lend a hand. Michelle's routine changed too. She found herself invited to more block parties, Sunday morning coffees, and impromptu gatherings than she ever expected. With Rex at her side, she navigated the world with growing confidence, and the fear that once haunted her steps grew smaller with every day. Chuck, for his part, faced real consequences. The footage of his intimidation, spread online and aired on local news, meant the justice system and the court of public opinion couldn't ignore what he'd done. There were charges, court dates, and ultimately, a sentence that kept him away from the neighborhood. Michelle sometimes wondered if he truly understood the harm he'd caused. But more often, she chose not to dwell on him at all. He was part of her story, yes, but not the part that mattered most. What did matter was how people changed. Michelle was surprised when the mayor's office asked her to help lead a community safety initiative. She hesitated at first. Public speaking was still new and daunting. But Jasmine and her neighbors insisted, "You don't have to do this alone. We'll be there. Rex will be there. You already started something good. Just keep going." And so she did. At the first meeting, the room was packed. Michelle stood at the front, Rex at her feet, as children giggled and adults listened attentively. She spoke honestly about her experiences, not just the fear, but the resilience, the moments when she thought she'd break, and the strength she found instead. Safety, she told them, isn't just about locks and alarms. It's about knowing who your neighbors are. It's about looking out for each other. Community isn't built by avoiding danger, but by facing it together. The message resonated. People volunteered for new programs, youth outreach, after-school escorts, walking buddies for the elderly. The police, once viewed with suspicion or indifference, began holding regular coffee with a cop events, listening to concerns and offering practical advice. Michelle worked with them to design accessibility workshops, teaching officers how to interact with people who are blind, deaf, or disabled. She felt the difference each time someone greeted her by name, each time a child asked to pet Rex and learned about his training, each time a neighbor reached out instead of turning away. For Rex, life was good too. The cafe became his unofficial headquarters. There was always a fresh bowl of water, a scratch behind the ears, or a treat slipped to him under the table. Kids drew his picture on the sidewalk with chalk, and older residents swapped stories of the pets they'd loved and lost. He accepted it all with calm dignity, never seeking the spotlight, content simply to be by Michelle's side. Late one evening, as summer faded into fall, Michelle and Rex took a walk through the neighborhood. The air was cool, leaves crackled underfoot, and laughter spilled from a porch where friends gathered around a fire pit. Michelle paused, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and cinnamon from the nearby bakery. She let herself reflect on the months that had changed her life. There were still challenges. There were still days when fear whispered at the back of her mind, or when the loss of her sight felt like too heavy a burden. But now, those moments were met with the memory of how she had survived, and how her neighbors had rallied. The world wasn't suddenly safe or perfect, but it was safer, and it was better, because people chose to care. Rex nudged her hand, grounding her in the present. She knelt, burying her face in his fur, grateful for the steadfast loyalty that had seen her through every dark night. "Thank you, Rex," she whispered, "for everything." He thumped his tail, the only answer she needed. At the end of the block, the cafe's porch light shone like a beacon. Michelle smiled, recalling how she'd once entered that building anxious and unsure. Now, she felt herself a part of its very heartbeat, woven into the fabric of a community that had found its courage. As they walked home, Michelle reflected on what she'd learned. Courage isn't about seeing everything coming. It's about trusting what and who you know is true, even in the dark. Community is built not by avoiding danger, but by standing together. She realized her journey wasn't just about overcoming fear or even about facing down a bully. It was about discovering the true meaning of safety, loyalty, advocacy, and shared responsibility. Her blindness no longer defined her. Her story, and Rex's, was now about hope, action, and the bonds that make a neighborhood into a family. Back at her apartment, Michelle opened the window to let in the night air. She heard the hum of conversation from the street below, the gentle bark of a dog, the sound of friends saying goodnight. She and Rex curled up together, comforted by the simple truth that real security is not the absence of threat, but the presence of people, and one extraordinary dog who will stand with you no matter what. And as she drifted off to sleep, Michelle smiled, certain that she and Rex would face whatever came next, together, in a place they could finally call home.